Good morning, y'all. So I have to begin with a confession, and that is I have never taken ICS 300 or 400. Finally, got it off my chest. For those of you who know my background, that might scare you or not, but there you go. So over the course of the next few minutes, I just want to talk about what I've seen as the shifting role of emergency management and what I think that means for our expectations for the profession. So I've been in this role now for about 20 years at different levels in university, state, federal, decided to come back to state because it's much more entertaining. And in that time, like many of you, we could prattle off around a couple bottles of whiskey, the weird things, right? Never did I think when I was in the Scouts that someday I would be standing at the edge of a quarry throwing rocks, trying to figure out how deep the quarry was so we could incinerate a missile. Never expected that one. Or train catching on fire underneath my city. Or that we'd be talking about unaccompanied children at the border, or the opioid crisis. But this is the world we find ourselves in emergency management. And for me at least, it's highlighted some different ways to think about our role and how we train and how we prepare. First off, I know we have a lot of folks in here who are a different generation and are now actually going through formal education programs. Hold on. Now I feel like I should sing something weird. So for the people in the back, I said some things, some people laughed, we moved on. Oh, you can keep it going. I'll take it as a challenge. So we're doing a lot of formal education, but I think we're missing an opportunity on the soft skills, because a lot of what I do isn't what's in the textbooks. A lot of what I do, a lot of what we do as emergency managers is negotiating and public speaking. You know, my second confession, this terrifies me. I hate public speaking. None of you would believe that, but it's true. But this is the job. This is the role we put on. Narrative writing. We're never taught about nonfiction narrative writing, but we need grant money, and we get that by nonfiction narrative writing. And so hitting more on these soft skills, these talents that make us better and more successful at what we do is critical. Second, be prepared for the non-traditional role. My prior life, I had a chance to work on the National Prevention Framework, tying together Homeland Security and the intelligence community broader, and FBI, to talk about the things we might do to prevent an attack. FEMA was coordinating that development. Not the IC, not law enforcement, FEMA. Why? Because we didn't have a dog in the fight, right? We didn't own an element of the IC, and so we got to be the neutral party, and that's kind of what we're seeing ourselves doing more and more, right? This non-traditional role, because we're an arbiter, we're a negotiator, we're a collaborator. We bring everybody together. I think another piece is greater engagement beyond emergency management. For those of you in the session with me yesterday, we talked about getting engaged in city planning, in economic development, in social change. Because while we do a lot to help people to prepare, to plan for evacuations, the reality is that there are fundamental issues in our communities that change the effectiveness of those efforts, right? I can have the best evacuation plan in the world, but if people can't afford to spend money on a hotel room, if they can't afford to get out of town, then it doesn't matter. Now they're in harm's way and I have to deal with that. The other thing is these uncomfortable conversations, right? As we're growing as emergency managers, it's come time for us to begin looking at the conversations we don't want to have, right? So my favorite one is, do you rebuild? Does it make sense? Do you move on? I have a student in one of my classes, and we asked this ethical question. And she came up with a communications campaign that our city is not our culture. Trying to convey to a community that our culture is our people, and our people can be here, our people can be visiting Grand Rapids, they can be anywhere in the world, but as long as our people are together, our culture lives on. The geography doesn't matter. It's an interesting campaign, but it begins a conversation. There's one last thing, and it's sort of my third confession of the day. And think about all that we go through as a discipline. Certainly everything I've seen over the last 20 years. And my third confession is simply this. Over the course of that last 20 years, I have, like all of us do, we put on a very brave face. But over those course of that 20 years, I have been living with, dealing with, anxiety, depression, worse thoughts. Untreated, untested, because as emergency managers, we are supposed to be more human than human, right? We're supposed to understand what's going on and compartmentalize it and get it out of the way. I think the expanded role of emergency management and the bigger things we're getting involved in, like an opioid crisis, means that that tough face must stop. It's time for us to consider, as part of our skill set, our own mental health, understand coping mechanisms, understand how to take care of ourselves, because that'll make us better. It will also make us more empathetic to the people we serve and the people we work with, day in and day out. So I want to leave you with one final thought. I've been full of a lot of quotes this week, and there's a science fiction writer, Robert Heinlein, and I'll mutilate it. But basically he says in one of his books, a human should be able to fish, hunt, cook, build a house, plan a battle, con a ship, fight gallantly, die bravely, speak well of the dead, and do all these things, because specialization is for insects. All right? We're emergency managers. If there's a better quote about us, I don't know it. We do all these things, and we know who to call to help with them. So remember that, because that is our strength, and that's where I think it will continue to drive us forward into these broader engagements. Thank you for your time.